Today I thought it might be interesting to discuss the Elder Scrolls Online as a non-MMO player. Someone who loves Elder Scrolls the franchise and only just started playing ESO in 2019. I loved Oblivion and the Fallout games and still consider Skyrim to be one of my top 5 games of all time. I'm also anxiously anticipating Elder Scrolls 6, but that game is still a long way out. So this video is for Elder Scrolls fans who haven't followed ESO, but might be interested now that they announced a new DLC. Can you get a good solo experience out of ESO? Can you play the game like you would Skyrim? Is it a good holdover until Elder Scrolls 6 comes out? That's what I want to answer. I've always been hesitant to jump into ESO because of the fact that it's an MMO. While it's not true of all MMOs tend to get a bad rep for having boring quest structure, lackluster stories, and requiring group play in order to progress. And they're not usually known for great feeling combat, and to be honest, these were my greatest fears about ESO. As someone who plays games solo 99% of the time, I like a good story and an open world that I can take in at my own pace. You know, like Skyrim. However, despite my concerns about ESO, Steam had the base game with the Morrowind expansion on sale for $10, so I'm giving it a shot. First of all, the combat. MMOs tend to have floaty, less visceral combat than non-MMOs, and to an extent that's an issue here in ESO as well. It still looks a bit like two people standing in the general vicinity of each other and making attack animations while health bars slowly drain. It's a far cry from something like the new God of War, where there's something viscerally satisfying about the feeling of burying your axe in an enemy's shoulder. Or even Skyrim and Fallout melee weapon combat feels pretty good by comparison. But honestly, the feeling of casting magic abilities and firing off arrows feels on par with Skyrim, and dare I say, using a bow actually feels better? I might need to make a bow character. Also worth mentioning, one of the things I couldn't have picked up on from just watching an ESO trailer, they all tend to be cinematic only, or watching YouTubers or Twitch streamers playing the game, is that ESO's presentation style is far more like Skyrim and Oblivion than I realized. It's a small thing that most people probably don't care about, but you can totally play ESO in first person or third person mode with the camera just off the shoulder like in a standard Elder Scrolls or Fallout game. Just about all the streamers and YouTubers I've seen play the game play it with the camera zoomed out as far as it can go, and I can only assume that it's because that's what they're used to in WoW, or because they're playing content where there's so many enemies it becomes useful to have a wider field of view. But because of this, I genuinely forgot that the game was playable in first person. I don't know that I'd recommend playing the whole game that way, but if you're looking for a more standard Elder Scrolls experience, it's totally doable. In fact, I find it way more immersive to be closer to eye level with the world I'm exploring, and exploring the world and talking to NPCs feels a lot like it does in Skyrim. And that's a big deal to me, since some of the elements I enjoyed most about Skyrim was the design of the world, the environments, the small towns, the big cities, the voice dialogue, and the music. It all worked together to create a very compelling, very immersive fantasy adventure experience. And it's all very much intact here in ESO. To this day, I still listen to the Skyrim soundtrack as background music while I'm working on other things, and while Jeremy Soule, who did the music for Skyrim, only contributed to the music in ESO, Brad Derrick's work, especially in the Morrowind expansion that I've been playing, is fantastic. Also, all the NPCs are fully voiced, and the quest lines, at least so far, have felt like standard Skyrim-style quests. Which is to say, they're more than just fetch quests and kill so many of this style quests that MMOs get a bad rep for relying too heavily on. I'm sure those quests are out there in ESO as well, but so far I've been finding that the quests feel much more like what I'm used to from other Elder Scrolls games. In fact, I just completed a questline the other day in which I had to help a father find his lost daughter, but when I found her, she had run away to join some new order who was at odds with her father's house. I ended up getting involved with the people on both sides of the conflict, and in the end had to choose whether one of the characters lived or died. Then, like any good Elder Scrolls games, I bumped into one of the characters from that questline later on in a completely different town, and we talked about what they'd been up to since, and reminisced about whether or not the choice I made was the right one. There were even parts of the questline where I had to use stealth to sneak into restricted areas and steal information, and there were parts where NPCs joined me to complete certain objectives as well. In fact, NPCs in this game are far more active than you'd expect for an MMO. They don't just stand around waiting for someone to come talk to them and never move. In fact, Bethesda's other online game, Fallout 76, which is admittedly not an MMO, but seems to be going for a lot of the same things, has no NPCs, at least not yet. So to see so many fully voiced NPCs who are active participants in the world around me and the quests I'm playing was something of an unexpected surprise. Man, Fallout 76 really did a number on my expectations. Anyway, the living city aspect of Elder Scrolls games is important, and while I don't think it's as specific as everyone having a daily routine where they walk and they have a job they perform, there's clearly an effort made to keep most of the NPCs from feeling like statues. Strong questlines like the one I mentioned are an example of how ESO is doing a lot more with its storytelling than other similar games, and pretty much anywhere you go, there are tons of people ready to give you similarly well fleshed out questlines. The characters are interesting, the world and the lore is interesting, and it ties into things you've learned about in previous games. And again, as someone who loves Skyrim, I can't wait to visit Skyrim in ESO. But now we have to talk about some of the not so great stuff. ESO being an MMO, there is of course a store, and while I've only happened across it by accidentally clicking on it, some people will be off-put by its mere presence, but for the most part the store is tucked away and not forcibly popped up in your face at any point. And because I have no interest in spending money on microtransactions, I haven't even bothered to browse the offerings, so just keep it out of sight, out of mind. Then there's the fact that ESO's menus and crafting and dungeons and leveling system can be a bit overwhelming. The game doesn't do a great job of walking you through how it all works. In fact, I had to look up an idiot-style guide to figure out the difference between the handful of different types of dungeons in the game. They're all marked by different icons on the map, and the game doesn't do much to explain the difference. The game can even give you quests to go try to kill powerful world bosses or enter these dungeons before you're ready, and believe me, that world boss made short work of me. For you solo players out there, you're looking for the dungeons called delves. They're the ones that are completable solo. And as far as seeing other players in your game world, it's only really immersion breaking when you're trying to follow a fairly emotional story beat, but a bunch of AFKers are standing in the way.
What happened here? Oh gods, they murdered these poor Ashlanders! Oh no, Oran, wake up, please! You can't be dead. You just can't!
But I have yet to have an issue with loud mics during conversations with NPCs. If you're really hoping for a solo experience, you may get frustrated by other players invading your space during story moments, but you'll probably be glad they're around once you get into some combat. Anyway, my early honest impression as someone who just wants Elder Scrolls 6 but decided to give ESO a chance in the meantime is that you can totally play the game solo and treat it like a standard solo Elder Scrolls game. There's a lot to do and a lot to explore, the combat feels better than I expected, and I've been pleasantly surprised by the storytelling and voice work. And if HowLongToBeat.com is to be trusted, there's a lot of content to be played between the base game and its expansions. And that isn't even accounting for the fact that depending on the allegiance you choose when you create a character, you'll start in a completely different area of the map and be given entirely different quest lines to follow up than the ones you played through on your previous character. Elder Scrolls 6 may be a long way out, but ESO is not a bad way to hold yourself over. But that's just one man's opinion. Let me know what you think of the game in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a like, consider subscribing, and check out some of our other videos, and we'll catch you on the next one.